Hello, welcome back to some more early morning barking, talking about BPD and NPD by somebody that has both. Don't forget to hit the like and the subscribe button and follow me on social media like Twitter at barking and Instagram and places like that. I post pictures of dogs. They're really quite cute. Today's a hard one, guys. We're going to face up to some horrible shit. But we should do this, right? This is an important thing to do. I've been looking at narcissistic abuse because this is how we ruin stuff. This is for me the worst of what I ever did. And so we have to face up to these things and figure out what we did so we can never do them again, right? But it requires looking at some really difficult things and discussing some really hard topics. And there's not a lot of support out there. There's a lot of, as you browse YouTube, there are a lot of videos made by people who have been the victims of narcissistic abuse. And I completely understand that pain and the need to express it. It's not helpful to us as such. And then there's the more clinical approach that seems to talk about signs and symptoms of this, but still doesn't touch on really what's going on in the head of the person that's doing the bad things. So I've taken a lot of this from Dr. Todd Grande's video on signs of vulnerable narcissism. Words. I should cut that. I'm not going to. 10 signs of vulnerable narcissistic abuse. And there's a link in the description below so you can go and watch that video. And he lists 10 things. And in that particular video, they're related to vulnerable narcissism. And we'll come back to grandiose narcissism. There are the two types, and we can transition between them at any given moment for whatever reason. Personally, it's a bit like a switch. I can just turn on grandiose narcissism immediately if I need to. The vulnerable stuff is much more underlying and constant, and that's what we're going to touch on first. He talks about 10 signs, and I'm not going to go through them all in a group of 10 because it kind of cuts down the amount of time that we can talk about each one. And from our point of view, some of them are very similar and very closely related in terms of their cause and what's going on for us. So we can sort of group them together a bit and discuss them all together. And the ones I'm talking about, he talks about being unforgiving during arguments and making arguments go on for a very long time. And being able to argue forever and wear the other person down and never relent. And this becomes a form of abuse. You don't think it is because that's not what's going on for you, right? You're not looking at your significant other and thinking, I'm going to try and hurt this person now. That's what it feels like to them. And that's why it's abusive. That's why it destroys people emotionally and wears them down and breaks them over a period of time. Because we start arguments about anything, nothing, whatever. We can be extremely volatile, especially when things aren't going our way, when we're feeling particularly bad. We can just get into arguments. I've been through long periods of just arguing over everything and anything because everything made me angry. And I can keep an argument going for hours and hours. We reach the point where there's nothing the other person can say or do to let us either forgive them or stop trying to argue about something. And as arguments progress, we find further things within the argument to argue about for longer. And I think some people could keep this up for days. Maybe some people could keep this up for weeks. I don't think I ever did it for that long, because it wears us out too, right? Arguing isn't good for anybody. It doesn't make anybody feel good. It doesn't get you anywhere. And Dr. Grande does sort of cite a lack of moving forward, both in relationships and in arguments, as signs of this being related to narcissism. But what's going on for us is the difficult thing. That's what's never talked about. And I know what was going on for me all the time. The difficult part to admit, because it sounds horrible at first, is that it feels good. Shouting and arguing and whatever you do during that feels good. And that encourages you to want to carry it on and do it more, which is horrible and relentless, and kind of makes it, that's what sort of makes it so that the other person can't do anything to stop you. You just want to carry on because it feels good, which, like I say, sounds horrible. The reason why it feels good is because, again, for me, I was releasing tension and upset. There was something built up in me that I was letting out, and it was coming out in the form of starting arguments and shouting and being volatile. It's entirely projection. I was never that angry at the person that I was angry at, that I was shouting at. The person that I was angry at was me. Always me. It's vulnerable narcissism, right? This is all based on things we hate about ourselves, things we're uncomfortable with, and we're making up for it with this stupid personality disorder that makes us think we're actually great when we know really we aren't. And these long arguments that go on for hours and days where you're just shouting are a projection of that pain. You're not really mad at the person that you're shouting at, you're mad at yourself and projecting it out. That person is simply a placeholder, and because they're the person closest to you, they become that placeholder the most often. And in relationships, arguing is difficult enough when it's over a real thing. There's lots in life to argue about that are really real. Real things couples can disagree on. But when it's bullshit, when it could come up at just any minute, when there's anything that could trigger it, then it becomes just a hostile environment to live in. That's what makes us horrible. That volatility, that knowing that it's just there below the surface all the time. This anger and this rage that wants to come out. And it's going to come out all over somebody. But it's internal rage. It's internal hatred. I was angry at me all the time. All the things I got angry about were things that made me feel inadequate. Issues regarding money, issues regarding relationships moving forward, issues regarding life in general and my behavior as an adult. All of these things that I knew were problems anyway, that I hated about myself. And it was all there just beneath the surface. I was tense and ready to rage at any given moment because I was so upset and caught up in all these things that I hated about myself. And they're not really there anymore as much. That helps a great deal. It also helps no longer having anybody to rage at. Although I don't know that that shows that a problem is solved, does it? That just shows that there's nobody to rage at. I don't feel like I have that level of anger in me anymore. But also, I'm not that angry at myself anymore. As part of moving forward and getting better, as I start to feel less inadequate and happier in myself and who I am and what I do and all of that stuff, I've got less to be angry about. I've got less that I encounter on a day-to-day basis that makes me feel bad about myself. I'm down to very little, if anything. And the things that do creep in, I know they're there. And I know now that I'm angry at me and that I'm angry at these things that I don't like about myself. And so it doesn't want to come out in this form of rage anymore. It comes out in frustration at myself, but it's not been any work to keep it internal. It feels like it's been a case of finding a good way of expressing the frustration I feel while at the same time dealing with what's causing that frustration. You have to do both things, right? It's all well and good learning how to express anger and frustration properly, which you do really need to do. But that only gets you so far if you're still being caused this anger and frustration by your own feelings of self-hatred and inadequacy and all of these other things that might have gone to causing your NPD in the first place. This stuff needs work. And if you've made it as far as starting to question, which is the first step, then you can start looking at these things now, right? That's the next step. What are the things that are dragging me down and causing me to rage over here? And you can start to look at these and deal with these one at a time. And then this becomes less of a task over here. There's less work to do. There's less rage to hide. It goes away. So there's a positive way of dealing with this. There is a way out of it. The horrible thing you have to deal with, the hardest part you have to get your head around, is the pain that you've caused with this. It's not called narcissistic abuse because you just do it a couple of times. It's a prolonged, repeated pattern of behavior that destroys another person. And realizing that is going to break you. That's going to be the hardest thing you have to realize and deal with. That's going to break you. And you have to come back from that and forgive yourself and know that you're doing something to move forward, which in itself is very difficult to do. How do you forgive yourself for all that pain that you've caused? I don't know I've managed to do that fully. I know that it still affects my behavior every day. It's always with me because I did the most horrible thing I could think of. And I didn't mean to, and I didn't know I was doing it. And that's the pain of this, isn't it? You don't know you're doing it until later, when you've already done it, and the hurt's caused, and the person is broken. I think we can stop it from now, though. I think we can ensure that that doesn't happen again. Maybe we do, in our lives, hurt people from time to time when we don't mean to. But we can at least make sure that it's not this, right? So we have to work on ourselves. We have to find out what's causing this anger and rage that we're projecting onto other people. Because dealing with that is how we get rid of the anger and rage, right? Find these things, deal with them. The anger and rage is a symptom, not a thing in itself. I'm going to have to leave it there. We'll come back and visit other things in this category. They're all going to be equally difficult, so I'm going to space them out. We can't do a lot of these in a row. I'll have to think of a fun one to do next time. Fewer questions or something. I don't know. Anyway, you take care. I'll see you later. Bye.